Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio. In this video, I'm going to be answering the question, how The Mandalorian was filmed, both Season 1 and Season 2. Well, to give it to you, it's called stagecraft. There's your answer. Now, if you want to get into a little bit more about what it is that stagecraft is, I'm going to help you understand it. And it's super interesting technology. It's kind of the future of filmmaking in a lot of ways. And we'll actually close out this segment with a word from Frazier, who is the DP on the first season of Mandalorian, and he's kind of the first DP to use this new technology. He's one of them, but it's super interesting tech. It's the future of filmmaking, so I'm going to try to help us all wrap our minds around this idea. To get started, it first was actually Jon Favreau's vision, because he knew, well, everybody knew that if you were to create a series for Star Wars, a live action Star Wars, really any super fantasy or complex story, it's going to take a lot of time and it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of times hiccups and troubleshooting of weather and travel, and all of that is a real headache when it comes to video production. And so he had a vision that if we could set up a stage to be almost the one-stop shop for our entire set, our entire production, well, that will actually allow us to create these tremendous stories on a big scale. And so that's exactly what they did. So Jon Favreau had this vision, and he worked with people at Unreal Engine and a bunch of other really smart people to create this realistic video game technology world inside of something called the volume. Now, let me explain what the volume is. Volume is a almost circle of an LED wall on the ceiling and on the walls. The volume is the room that is surrounded by these LED walls. Now, LED technology has gotten better in even just the past 5 years. I remember a little bit before the clip we're going to watch with Frazier, he actually talks about we are able to do this today because even 5 years ago, LED technology wasn't good enough to be able to create something like this, but now it is. And so because that is the case, they are able to create this room that essentially is displaying an image for you. It can be a video image or a picture or whatever you have, and they're using Unreal Engine, this video game technology, to design the world that they are going to be putting up on these screens. So what they did is they used Unreal Engine to create a realistic image that is probably about 360 degrees, and they display it onto the walls and the ceiling of this world. So kind of like a VR headset, you can look around and see everything in your environment. That's exactly what they did, but on these LED walls. It's super cool because the order of production is usually, pre-production and then production and post-production. And so all of the animation, the video effects, the visual effects, all of that comes after production. But this kind of actually reverses the order to where you're saying, well, our final product is going to kind of be in camera for the most part, except for a few extras they put in there. So really, it's reversing the order and saying that the video effects needs to come before they actually hit record on the camera, so that the environment has all of the droids, the background, the ships flying around that you need in order to make this atmosphere doable. Because of this allowed teams of people to literally be on set in the stage and to say, well, the color is a little off with the entire environment. It's a little, maybe say it's a little too cool, it's a little too blue, and we need to make it match a little bit more green. Well, they are literally able to, in real time, in 5 minutes, shift the color in the entire environment to make it match what they need. It goes the same with brightness or contrast, and even they were able to take elements. So if there's a weird tree or a building positioned in a weird place that's going to mess with the camera or the environment, they could actually take it or move it over a little bit. It's super cool. It's literally designing a video game for cinema. This is incredible for the actors because it actually allows the actors to know the environment they're in. Plus, it allows all of the light and the colors to leak onto the set and the actors themselves. We know the Mandalorian suit is reflective. Everything about it is reflective. And so if you were to shoot that on a green screen or a blue screen, well, you would be literally reflecting that screen that's behind you. So what they needed is they needed to in camera be able to make this character's suit be reflective of the environment. So that's super helpful because you don't have to deal with all of this, try to get all the green out of the image. You actually can just leave the image as it is because it was already filmed perfectly, and the colors and everything looks so natural because the environment that's surrounding them is the correct environment with the correct lighting, exposure, and color. One step they actually had to be very innovative with was camera perspective. Now, when you're wearing a VR headset, everything's just wide and you can look around, and so it's more rudimentary. But with this, they're filming, they're using cameras, so you have the issue of perspective and depth that you actually have to deal with in the environment. It's not as simple as just saying throw up screens and the camera will make it look great. No, sometimes you actually need your environment to move according to how zoomed in the camera is to your character, because the lens perspective changes everything in the image. The foreground, the background, even the background that's miles away, if you're able to see that, it changes all of that. So they actually had to attach almost like a sensor to see what the camera is seeing on the back wall, the portion of the back wall it's seeing, and move around according to where the camera's pointing to adjust for that zoom, perspective, depth needed for their image. I remember in some interviews, a lot of actors said it was a bit trippy because the environment looks so realistic, but then they would see, a camera square moving around on the LED wall to force the perspective needed for that shot. So it's cool because everything works together, but you still, it feels like you're in the environment, but you still have the needed groundwork for the camera to look right, for everything to work together like a dance so that the image looks correct and convincing. Let me move on to kind of what we're seeing in camera and the benefits and how it affects each other. So when it comes to the acting, most of all of The Mandalorian for both season 1 and season 2, most of it is filmed in the volume. So all of the actors interacting, basic, movements, it's all inside of this LED volume world. I'm going to call something fast action for the need to describe it. Basically, so if you have characters running through the desert, that's just a really quick shot, and a lot of visual effects are going to be needed to add to that shot. Sometimes they did use blue screen for fast action, for maybe a battle sequence or something of that nature. They used blue screen there. They also sometimes made the entire image animation. It could be all designed, and just like we've seen for years with Hollywood, just the entire image is animated. That's like with spaceships or, small speeder bike chases, those kind of things. Like the whole image is animated as opposed to part animation and part live filming. And sometimes they had a mix of the two. So it's kind of like they had to look at the scenes and say, what do we need for this scene and how are we going to create it effectively? Can it be filmed in the volume? And if not, we're going to animate it, or maybe we require a blue screen because there's a lot of people and we have to, make it work for our schedule, for our time, and get the shot that we need. Let me distinguish between something I'm calling the background and the foreground because it helps me describe a little bit better to you. So the background is going to be kind of like physical, on the floor, inside the volume, set design pieces, and then also a little bit into the LED wall that kind of hides where the line is, where the wall starts and the actual physical set design starts. They had to kind of hide that. And so when I'm talking about the background, I'm talking about like what is behind the actors or what is in the scene that's partly real and partly on the wall right behind them. There's a couple ways they went about this. A lot of times these scenes were maybe just completely animated and then added the physical set design around them. Maybe like they have to have a pillar and maybe like a side wall next to the character, and then everything behind them can be on the LED screens, but sometimes they actually did this occasionally. They would make miniatures of the set that they want in the background, and they would 3D scan those miniatures and add them to the video backdrop for the LED wall. So they actually physically built them, just miniatures, and then blew them up to the appropriate scale for the LED wall. So it does do a super good job at just hiding where that distinguishing wall and where the wall hits the floor and all of that. So it gets very technical when you think about it, and even what's necessary scene to scene. I think it's super creative. I think if you're working in this environment, you're not only working with some of the most advanced technology for cinema, but it's also every day you have to troubleshoot creatively to make this style of filmmaking work for your scene, make it convincing, and at the same time make it beautiful. Another part of the background is a lot of it's just animated. The cool thing I found out is they actually made miniatures of droids and did motion capture on a green screen for those droids and then added them to the video wall, because not because they had to, but because it actually adds that classic beloved Star Wars aesthetic that we've seen from the old films, when most of the movement had to be motion capture or puppeted, essentially. So it makes you feel like you're inside the Star Wars universe, even though that's an unnecessary step. The aesthetic is super important, and that's something that creatives were able to think around and be like, how do we make this feel like Star Wars? Let's incorporate some out-of-date tricks, add them to the modern technology and the modern processes we have today. So that was super cool. And then the foreground, I want to talk about what's super off. Like if they're outside and not in like a small room, then you could sometimes see for miles, especially some of those scenes on Tatooine. So it was super important that the foreground is also convincing. Now that foreground basically is all animated because it's so distant in Unreal Engine, just like a lot of the other bits. But the foreground is important because you might have a spaceship flying up, so it can't just be an image. It also has to be a 3D image. Like I said earlier, the camera perspective, even mountains miles away, if you move the camera a certain way, you're getting a new perspective, even if it's slightly, on that distant mountain or on that distant character. And so you have to account for that in this 3D space and design digitally the foreground to be able to be manipulated accordingly. So the way I found benefit is thinking you have the physical set design on the floor with the actors. Then you have the wall, and right on the wall that's closest to the actors, you have background, more set design that looks like it's incorporated in with the physical set design. And then you have the foreground, either movement with droids or ships or whatever. And you have even the environment if you're outside or in like a big spaceship hangar or whatever. You have all of these elements working together. Now, in my opinion, this technology is exciting. Some filmmaking purists might disagree and say, no, it's not the real thing. We need to actually go and capture these images as raw as possible, I guess, and there's beauty in that. There is some beauty to having that puristic mindset, but when it comes to being able to tell incredibly cool stories and the financial ability to do so, this technology has to be incorporated. And in my opinion, it's so much better than anything we have with green screen, blue screen, any kind of keying out of something to make it work. This is so much better. It's so much more effective, and it allows the creativity to just blow the ceiling off and shoot for the stars. And that's literally what they did in Star Wars. Oh my gosh. I want to end real quick with the soundbite from Greg Frazier from a podcast he did. It was a super interesting moment that I heard him say, and so let's go ahead and listen to it right now.
LED technology, real-time gaming engine, this has a lot of potential in the future. And I think that people see the making of Mandalorian, and I love when people see it and they have their minds blown, because that was the intention. Mm-hmm. But I'm already in like version 4 in my brain, like where, you know, you've got movable flats and you've got stages that are maneuverable, and like create a whole range of set pieces with the technology, I think's totally viable. And I would say watch this space, because it's only going to get more interesting.
Indeed, we will definitely keep our eyes on this space to see what is innovating in the whole volume LED wall world for cinema. It's super exciting. I'm very looking forward to seeing what creators like himself and Jon Favreau and all of these extremely creative and smart people can think up and incorporate into their storytelling world. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that this gets you excited about the future of filmmaking and storytelling. And if you want to, watch more videos like this or keep up with cool technology and news and techniques in filmmaking, well, I ask you that you would subscribe to the channel, and you can see the new content that I myself or my friend Wyatt or me, my friend, and my brother talk about on the podcast. We talk about storytelling, filmmaking. We do movie commentaries on this channel. So thanks so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and give the video a like. Tell me in the comments if you learned something or if there's something in this world of Star Wars technology for filmmaking that you would like me to talk on and to educate myself on a little bit in the process. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.